like to do a certificate demonstration kind of as a part of an upgrade. Here's the deal. I've got an organization right now in my garage. I've got a GK demo forest that I've reverted back to before you guys were, before you guys had user accounts. I just remembered that I wanted to take each of your usernames and add them into my little environment. It seemed like there was one thing during the last break that I was frustrated with myself. I couldn't remember what to do, and it was this. I want you guys to be able to participate in this demo. And so what I'm going to do is take all of your names and just do a real quick surgery on this little list so that I've got all of your names in a single notepad file. This won't take long. I want to go ahead and link enable all of you in my 2010 environment, and then I want to introduce some 2013 servers. And the thing that I want to do with the 2013 servers first is request some certificates and talk about what exactly those certificate requests are doing behind the scenes. I used to do certificate administration by pointing and clicking, and things seemed to work, but I was never really quite sure what I did. And then eventually I got a decent understanding of what was really happening behind the scenes. And I'd like to walk you through the way I think about certificates. So I just wanted to copy all that stuff to the clipboard and then come into a 2010 Lync server. You can see that right now I've got a user account. All these user accounts are home in my 2010 Lync server. And I want to create user accounts for each of you guys as well. Forgot to do this during the last break, but it won't take long. I just have to go into this little file where Hyper-V lets you take one character at a time, whatever in your clipboard, and paste it on in. And so now, not sure what's going on with that. I have a file that I thought was in this add users folder. What did I just do? Here is a file called addusers.ps1. The whole point of this file is to read the contents of a file called users.csv and find where the first name is, create a user account for each of you. I created this on, I used the same file back on Monday or Tuesday to create user accounts for each of you guys. It's in the folder called add users, cd add users, and then I'm just trying to run the add users ps1 file. I don't know why that didn't work before. I must have had a typo in there that I didn't recognize. Anyway, it just ran a little program that created a user account on behalf of each of you. Your users right now in the Active Directory database don't have any tag on them, any attribute of them telling what the email address is. That's the SMTP address, or the SIP URI, the thing that looks like an email address that the SIP servers need. And I'm going to go to my Exchange server first of all, and then Exchange enable you. That's just when you say get-user and see how many user accounts there are in the organization. It will tell you which ones have mailboxes and which ones don't. And then if you hit the vertical bar and say enable-mailbox, it will give a mailbox to all the users who didn't currently have one. So now all you guys have a email account that you can use. You can log into webmail.gkdemo.com and send and receive email using that user account. And now I'm going to come over to my Lync server and Lync enable the users just like I Exchange enabled the users a moment ago. Just find all of your usernames in the Active Directory database, highlight them, hold down the control button, and if I don't miss anybody, then each of you should now be Lync enabled as well. I've got the 2010 server pool is the only one that's active in my forest right now, and I'm just going to use your email address for your SIP URI. So you can once again sign in. You couldn't up until a minute ago, but now you can do the same thing you could do back on Tuesday, only these days it's a 2010 server that's responding. I've got a 2010 front-end server at this IP address with that name. I've got a 2010 Edge server that's responding online. I'm signed in to the Lync 2013 client. The 2010 server is responding just fine. I'm signed in. I can have a conversation with my dog Mancha. She also has a 2010 user account, and so says Mancha is offline. Well, look at that. She sure is. Give me one moment. Mancha had not actually signed in. God, you know, you invite a dog to be a part of your demonstrations, and she doesn't even sign into her Lync client. It's Good help is hard to find these days. So Mancha is sitting over there diligently at her post. No, Mancha, you don't have to actually get up. I'm sorry, girl. I wasn't trying to complain about you. You're a good girl. You're a good girl. Yes, you're good. It should be auto-answering this call. I've got a baby monitor set up on Mancha's machine so that it should be automatically answering, but maybe the fact that it was not signed in a moment ago is keeping it from wanting to do the answering. I'd really like to have a call active for when we do the upgrade, when I do what Microsoft calls migrating a user, what I call upgrading a user. I'd like to have the video active, so give me one moment. Okay, I've got Mancha's webcam started now. That baby monitor software isn't the most reliable thing in the world, so it didn't automatically answer with video. So my pup is a part of this demonstration now. That means that I can use her food today as a tax deduction, so that's good. When I go to the 2010 server, it's perfectly healthy, working great. When I go and take a look at the total list of servers that I've got on my network, I've already installed an operating system on a machine called Lync 13 and a machine called Edge 13. These are two servers that I walked over with the Lync server DVD and installed the front-end services on one of them, the Edge services on the other, but I haven't yet brought them to life because I haven't yet installed certificates on them. And I want to go to the front-end server, that's this guy. I'm in the deployment wizard. You see that I've already gone in and installed the SQL Express is what that first green checkbox installs, and then in that second green checkbox, it makes a database on the SQL Express that it just installed for it. That's what those two checkboxes do. So I've done that, the time-consuming parts of the upgrade. Notice that I still have the ability to sign in as me and Mancha. The user accounts who are connected to the 2010 servers are not affected by simply you introducing a new 2013 environment. I want to clarify that don't be concerned. If you have a good existing old OCSR2 or 2010 server environment, you can be cavalier about installing some new services. You're not going to interrupt the existing user access by the introduction of the newer servers. So go ahead and do the installation of the services. I did it on the front-end server here and on the Edge server. I've got both of them configured with those green check boxes for the top two run buttons. And where I paused was in talking about the certificates. When I come to the front-end server here and click on this little run button, the next thing that I'm supposed to do is install certificates. And what I want to do is use this opportunity to talk to you about certificates and why they're so important and what they're actually doing behind the scenes, and try to give you some insight into what's really going on in a way that I wish somebody had done when I first started having to work with certificates. So let's leave Lync server behind for a second and talk just about certificates in general, the nature of why we have certificates and what they're doing for us. Let's just talk about when you go to a web bank like citibank.com. If I go to citi.com, this is actually going to be an HTTP location that I'm going to go to here. There is an HTTP listener. There's a web server that's listening for citi.com requests, and all it's going to do is redirect me to an HTTPS server. And when it does that, you see that the HTTPS server that it redirected me to gave me all this wonderful content, and it is named online.citibank.com. I didn't type that into my web browser, but I got redirected to it, and so that's the resource that I'm currently interacting with. This little green arrow here, the area here, lets me see the certificate information and click on this little details, and I get to see everything that's in the certificate that is used for the conversation between my web browser and the Citibank server. And I'd like to talk for a second about web browsers and web servers and how they use certificates, because that's the most common way that you guys are going to be using certificates in your life. There are other certificates that you will need, for instance, a Lync server and a Lync client having a certificate-based conversation. But let's start with the basics of the most common way you interact with certificates, which is you're checking your bank balance, you're trying to buy something on eBay, whatever it is that you're interacting with a secure web server for. There's going to be a certificate involved with that conversation. I'd like to talk about why, because I was confused by this for about 5 years. I had recently acquired a degree from Georgia Tech. I went to Georgia Tech for actually 9 years, start to finish, because I was 5 years in the rocket science program. Aerospace engineering kicked my butt for 5 years before I was eventually asked to leave the premises because I failed one too many classes. I'm not ashamed of that because I actually failed one class where I had the highest grade in the class. I'm not making that up. If you want to get a aerospace engineering degree from Georgia Tech, you need to be better than everybody in the class, including yourself sometimes. So I washed out of that program, eventually got the computer science degree, and I was doing work in the industry in the IT field. I'd been working my way through college for years anyway, so I eventually got the computer science degree, got a programming job, and when I got to this programming job in '96, we were doing web development. I was writing C programs that would generate HTML one character at a time, pretty tedious stuff. We have tools these days to do my 3-week projects in about 15 minutes, literally. And I had customers that were wanting us to stand up web pages, and some of them were requesting encrypted web pages, which was simple enough. I could go into my HTML and make sure that everything was encrypted, even at an HTTP resource. And then people started requesting this new stuff that I hadn't heard of before called secure web pages using certificates. And I asked the powers that be at the company, why are customers demanding this? Because we have to go to VeriSign and buy a certificate for hundreds of dollars. They were thousands at that point. And I didn't understand what the point of it was. And everybody would always tell me the reason why we need the certificate is for encryption. For 5 years, that's the story that everybody would tell me when I said, do you actually know why we have certificates, why we buy these things? And people would say to me, it's for encryption. And I'd say, balderdash, I've been making encrypted web pages for years. I know that the encryption that I use is sometimes even stronger than what's set up by these certificates. So again, why do we have certificates? It can't just be for encryption. I can do that over HTTP that doesn't require a certificate. When you're using HTTPS, there is definitely a certificate involved in the conversation. Everything is definitely encrypted, but the web developer has the choice over HTTP of having everything be encrypted if he cares to do so. And when I did, everything was encrypted. And when customers would say, I want a certificate, I would ask, why? Because I can encrypt things for you for far cheaper just by doing it in my programming. And they would say, I don't know, our security administrator says we want a certificate. 5 years later, I was still asking people, do you know why we have certificates? And everybody would say, oh, so things are encrypted. And I would just say, there's got to be more to it. Finally, I try to cross-train whenever possible. I have classes that I take in VMware and Cisco and as many other walks of life as I can to try to broaden my knowledge. Definitely not an expert on very many things, but I try to make sure that I can interoperate with as much out there as possible. And I went to a Cisco class, I think it was in 2002. I'd been for 6 years trying to figure out why we have certificates. I understood how to point and click and make a certificate work. I just didn't understand the underlying rationale. And finally, there's a Cisco instructor, I don't even remember his name. I didn't realize at the time how important a moment it was for me when I took that class. But I finally had somebody who puts things in a way that made sense, and I couldn't believe how good his way of describing it would satisfy all my needs, would make me understand everything to do with certificates going forward. I went from a person who was a cookbook engineer, just following step 1, step 2, step 3, not making a mistake and everything works, to finally understanding the way things work, being a chef. And that is thanks to this one instructor that I wish I knew who it was so I could shake his hand, because I really have such dividends paid by that one class that I took in the 15 minutes he talked about this stuff. What he said was, certificates do for computers 2 things. And finally, I had somebody who was saying they do more than one thing. One thing that the certificates do is they set up encryption. Okay, yeah, that's easy. I can do that without its certificates. The second thing that certificates do for computers is they guarantee identity in the same way that a driver's license guarantees identity for a person. So think about the encryption stuff if you want to dwell on that for a second. There's something called a public key that's a part of every certificate that corresponds to a private key that's stored in the registry of a Microsoft server or in the memory of a Linux server. That private key is stored only in one place, and anytime somebody wants to set up a secure communication and encrypted communication with that entity, then the public key out there in the world can be used in conjunction with a private key stored just in one place, and a secure encrypted communication can exist because of that. So that's fine. That's one thing that the certificates do. But look at everything else that's in the certificate, and you're going to notice an amazing correlation between the information that's on your own driver's license, and it turns out it's intentional. Yesterday in the little slide deck, they mentioned this thing called the X.509 standard, and if you look at the X.509 standard and see what they were trying to do, they were trying to set up a mechanism whereby computers could carry around little ID cards. They could present these ID cards to other computers and prove who they are in the same way that we human beings, when we get asked to present our ID, we can reach into our wallet, grab out an ID card and hand it to somebody, computers have the ability to reach into the memory of the machine, grab an ID card called a certificate, and offer it to whoever is asking for it. The analogies are amazingly similar. The concept of a trusted issuer is an important one. I told you over the last few days that if you want to interact with the servers in my garage, you're going to have to trust my trusted root certificate. And the idea is the ID cards that were generated by my certificate authority are only going to be trusted by a small set of computers, whereas the ID cards, the certificates generated by VeriSign and Thought and GoDaddy and DigiCert, they're going to be trusted by everybody in the world. In the same way, if you bought a laminating machine, put it in your basement, and started printing out ID cards that said Bubba's Basement certifies that this person really is who they say they are, that's not going to be a valid way for you to walk around and your customers who bought these little plastic pieces, for them to walk around to different bars throughout the U.S. trying to get into bars to prove that they're over 21. Bubba's Basement certifying that somebody's over 21 is not good enough for most of the bouncers in the world. So you need to make sure that people wander around with a driver's license printed by the state of Virginia, the state of Montana, whatever. Those are the trusted issuers of ID cards, just like VeriSign and Thought and GoDaddy are the trusted issuers of your certificates. Now, you can stand up a certificate authority for free on a Microsoft system by installing Active Directory Certificate Services. The videos that I gave you links to in YouTube a few times this week show you how I installed the certificate authority in my garage. And you can also buy a laminating machine and put it into your house. Think about this. What if I had a problem with babysitters in my neck of the woods? People were hiring babysitters. They would steal all the silverware, and then it turns out we'd find out they had a criminal record all along, and if anybody just knew that, they wouldn't have hired them in the first place. Okay, if I decided to do a public service, maybe I got an inheritance and wanted to spend some money on a laminating machine and some background checks, I could encourage all the babysitters in the neighborhood to come to my house, and I'd do a background check on them and print out a little plastic ID card that says, Tommy's Basement certifies that this person is who they say they are and they don't have a criminal record. And the babysitters, potential babysitters, can then walk over in the neighborhood and present these little ID cards, and my little neighborhood, I could get a reputation where those ID cards could be looked at by people and people instantly say, oh yeah, Tommy's Basement says that you are who you say you are, then I'm going to trust it. A babysitter that has one of those ID cards going to Minnesota for the summer to do some extra, get some extra cash, shouldn't expect to be able to flash that at doors throughout the neighborhood in Minnesota and get any love. But if somebody in Minnesota knows somebody in my neighborhood, that babysitter can say, hey, just call your friend George down in Texas, and George can vouch for Tommy's Basement, and you can become convinced that these driver's licenses are legit. So it's possible for your sphere of influence to grow minimally if you have your own little laminating machine. Same kind of thing if you have your own certificate authority. It's possible for some machines to automatically learn about how your certificate authority is to be trusted, and then other people can learn one at a time. The reputation can spread, but it's never going to spread to the whole world. You have to manually make sure that new machines become convinced that you are a trustworthy resource. So that's what's going on in my basement, and the reason why, or not my basement, but my garage. I'm in Texas, we don't have basements. But the reason why the certificates had to be trusted by your machines, you're not in my domain, and therefore your machines don't trust mine by default. When I come to the Microsoft Management Console on this machine that is a member of the domain and look at the certificate snap-in, certificate snap-in shows 3 places in memory. The user account, server's account, and computer account places in memory are showing you 3 places in the registry in the memory of this server where certificates can reside, and the top 2 are places that can be fleeting. They can evaporate throughout the day. You don't want to put a certificate into either of these 2 places if you hope to have that server use it as an ID card. You want to look squarely in the computer account area for all the certificates that are going to stay there in the memory of this computer for as long as the computer is booted. Once you boot the computer, it reads the certificate stores that the computer account has into memory, and then as users log in and log out and log in and log out, other certificate stores will come to life and evaporate, and as services have automatic actions they need to perform, other places in memory will come to life and then evaporate. But if you have a server that you want to sit there waiting for a client to connect, and you want that computer to be able to reach into memory, into its wallet, grab a certificate and offer it as an ID card, you need to make sure that on the server you're always looking at the computer configuration area, the area that stays resident for the life of the boot. And if you notice, the Trusted Root Certificate Authorities mention the GKDemo CA for this server, Lync 13, that is a member of my domain. When you create a new certificate authority in a domain like mygkdemo.com here, all the machines that are in the domain are going to learn through group policy within a couple hours that that certificate authority is to be trusted. It's supposed to be added to the list along with Thought and Equifax and a few other ones. If you're wondering where VeriSign and GoDaddy are on this list, they're actually in the user configuration half. They don't go into the half that stays resident for the life of the boot, but they are still available for your server to utilize however you would like. It's really up to the client to trust the certificate. It really doesn't even matter as much that the server trust a certificate. It's a whole different issue, but the point is you need to make sure that your machine that you want to interact with other machines that have these certificates from this GKDemo CA, you want to make sure that that all the servers that you are going to be securing with these certificates, that they trust the CA that you've generated. I had my domain controller become a certificate authority. It could be any machine in the domain. It doesn't have to be the domain controller. Any server in the domain will work. Again, on my Edge server here, what did I just do? When I add a snap-in called certificates, I want to use the computer account setting. And you notice here on this Edge server, my Edge server doesn't start off trusting the domain controller as a CA. I've got the laminating machine, the ID printer, the certificate authority that I brought to life on my domain controller, and it's not for this machine that's in a work group. The work group machine is not going to automatically learn about the existence of this certificate authority. Group policy is not going to help me out and tell the work group machine to add the trusted certificate authority to this list. So I've got to open up Internet Explorer and go to my little folder called cert.gkdemo.com/cert and find this little file and take a look at it. If you're wondering where this content came from, I think one of you asked this question earlier today, or earlier in the week. On the certificate authority, if you just browse to see what shared folders are available on the machine that is your certificate authority, there's a folder called cert enroll that has these files that are automatically available. And if I were to go to a machine that does not trust this certificate authority and simply load up the certificate, I'm going to save this certificate here, save target as, put it, I don't know, on my desktop. So I just put this file onto my desktop, and now I can come into the list of trusted authorities and say that I'd like to import a certificate and specify that on my desktop is this file, and now all of a sudden I trust this certificate authority. I trust any certificate generated by this certificate authority thanks to the fact that I have added it to this list manually. You guys all earlier in this week that wanted the Lync client from your workstation to be able to connect to my server, you added your certificates to this list also. There's one place in memory where everybody who logs into the computer benefits from. That's this one. You can also look in the place in memory where an individual person benefits from it, and that is the user half of the certificate. I can add that half as well, add remove snap-ins and look at the user half of the certificate. This is where every single user that's signed in has got a list of trusted CAs, and that includes, oh, that's right, I'm looking at a server, not a client. I was trying to figure out why I didn't have VeriSign in here. It's the servers have a different default list than the clients do. Windows 8 and so forth don't have the VeriSign and GoDaddy in here, but the Microsoft root certificate authorities actually do some pointers to automatically vouch for the VeriSign and GoDaddy ones. They do things in a roundabout way. So the certificates that are evaporating, the current user certificates, if I were to log out, this whole place in memory would evaporate. It wouldn't be in memory anymore, but the place that's emblazoned on the computer would stay there for the life of this computer's boot. And you see that in the personal certificate store for this computer, there aren't any certificates that this Edge server can utilize. On my Lync 2013 front-end server that I'm building, there is a single certificate that's automatically generated. You see how the information on this certificate matches what's on a driver's license? There's an issuer, there's an issuee, there is a date that the driver's license was created, there's a date that it's valid to. All this matches what's on a driver's license intentionally. And you see here how the issuer matches the issuee? The thing generating the certificate matches the thing that received the certificate. That's unlike my demonstration with Citibank, where the issuer was VeriSign, and the issuee was online.citibank.com. This thing called the subject field specifies who was given the certificate. And that needs to match, this subject field needs to match exactly what's in the browser window, or something called the subject alternative name needs to match exactly what's in the browser window. In this case, both the subject and the subject alternative name match what's in the browser window, so everything works just fine. Essentially, what's going on with this name, if you walk up to a bouncer to try to prove who you are, the bouncer's not going to want to have a conversation with you ahead of time. He's not going to say, hey, how's your day going? I like the way your hair is done today. None of that's going to happen. The bouncer is going to hold out his hand. The very first thing that happens when you need to get into a bar is the bouncer holds out the hand and says, give me your ID. Now, in this analogy of the driver's licenses, the web browser serves the purposes of the bouncer at the bar, and the web server is like the bar patron trying to prove who they are. That gets confusing for some people because a lot of people, when they think about logging into a bank, they think that I'm a person who needs to type in my username and password and prove who I am to the bank. But long before that username and password field is ever given to you, the very, very first thing that happens when the browser and the web server interact with each other is the browser holds out its hand. There's something called an HTTPS GET request that happens before any data is going to flow, and that is the web browser holding out its hand saying, give me your ID. And the web server needs to reach into its memory, into its wallet. This is the wallet of the certificates that are stored in the memory of a machine. Reaches into the wallet to grab the ID card that it wants to offer, offers that ID card to the browser that's like a web, the web browser is like a bouncer at a bar. Remember the letter B? That's the way I keep my sanity when I'm trying to remember which direction this stuff is happening. The first thing that happens is the client, the web browser, the bouncer at the bar, hands out the hand to say, give me your ID. Then the thing trying to prove its identity will reach into its memory, into its wallet, grab the ID card, grab the certificate, offer that to the bouncer, to the browser, whatever you want to call it, or the Lync client, the Outlook client, all of these places where a conversation can start, they all start the process by asking for a certificate saying, hey, show me your ID. And that ID had better pass muster. There better be in either the subject or the subject alternative name fields exactly what the person had typed into a Outlook client or to a web browser or the Lync client, whatever the thing the client is trying to connect to, that had better match exactly the name of the server. Now, this whole idea of a subject alternative name, the subject alternative name that's being used for this Citibank only has one item in it, but that can have multiple fields. I don't know if my webmail.gkdemo.com is responding right now. It should be. Here we go. My webmail.gkdemo.com/OA. I can sign in. Well, apparently it's not. Yeah, my firewalls, I didn't really make the webmail be a priority for anything I'm doing. I wonder if the dial-in, I never tested much of my settings. Okay, so the site's not trusted, but I'm able to proceed past the security warning messages. If I look at the certificate that was just offered, you see here that there is a machine that is known by the name of link10.gkdemo.com. That's the subject, and you see this thing called a subject alternative name. There are many names that this machine has the ability to go by, and having a subject alternative name field in a certificate is a new thing comparatively. The XBAP 509 standard, as originally offered in 1988, didn't have this thing called a subject alternative name, but VeriSign was charging so much for a certificate back in those days, in the early 90s, mid-90s, when there was a company that had 5 Linux servers, or not even Linux back then, but ordinary Unix, when there was a company with 5 Unix servers, server 1, server 2, server 3, server 4, server 5, and they wanted to buy 5 certificates to identify those 5 servers, 5 different ID cards. Cost an arm and a leg to do that. What the people, what the great masses were clamoring for was a way to go to VeriSign, or its competitors thought at the time and so forth, go to them and say, I'd like to buy one certificate, one ID card that I can put in the memory of multiple servers. Just put all 5 of my server names into one certificate, and then I can save myself some money. And that was something that was eventually rolled into the standard, this thing called a subject alternative name. Now, using the driver's license analogy, that's like walking up to the Department of Motor Vehicles and having me say to the person behind the counter, hi, my name's Thomas Christensen, I'd like an ID card that says that. Oh, and while you're at it, put onto the ID card, Eric Valdez. Oh, and Judy Hansen, and just whatever names I want to throw out there, expect for the person behind the counter to just keep jotting them down and offer me an ID card that has all that. Well, that's what a subject alternative name is. The people at the Department of Motor Vehicles are not going to like you if you make that request, but the people at VeriSign and GoDaddy and DigiCert are going to be able to charge you more money for that certificate than they would an ordinary one. So the more names you ask for, the more money they get for that certificate. And Microsoft leverages the fact that the subject alternative name has been rolled into the standard by allowing you to have a single server that can have multiple names. And so this one server called Lync 10, that's its official name, also can go by the name of dialin.gkdemo.com, meet.gkdemo.com, and so forth. All these different names can be emblazoned on a single server. No matter what a client uses to try to get to that server, as long as the name is on that list, there's not going to be a certificate error message there. So again, a driver's license, when you get it and hand it to a bouncer, they can ask you, okay, what's your name? And you better pronounce your name right, otherwise they know it's not your ID. You have the expiration date. You have all these things on the driver's license that match what you have in a certificate. And so what I want to do now that I have had my Edge server trust the trusted root certificate, I want to go ahead and make requests for a certificate of my front-end server here and the Edge server, get all the certificates to come to life so that all these services that are down, they're going to be able to start. Once I tell my servers which certificates to use, which ID cards in memory to attach to which services, then those services can come to life, and if anybody tries to interact with them, when a client comes up to one of them and says, hey, I'd like to interact with you, please give me your ID card, these services will be able to reach into memory, grab the certificate that's been associated with that service, and offer that certificate to start the conversation. So let's go ahead and do the request of the certificates here. I've already gone through this request so that the values would be preloaded. I like this little wizard in that if you go through it one time, it remembers the last answers that you specified. So taking the certificate authority in my organization, I'm going to make a request for a certificate. VeriSign would charge for this certificate. GoDaddy and DigiCert would all charge for this certificate, but because I'm getting it from my own certificate authority, it will be free. The drawback is, of course, using your own printing press for the certificate to be printed means that it has a limited use, and you need to one by one spread the reputation the way that I've done by giving you a URL where you can download the trusted root certificate. So this is the certificate that the front-end server is going to use to identify itself to clients. When users try to interact with this server, this certificate is what's going to be offered. And you want to type in the organization name, the IT name, the city, and the state. Don't have any typos in there, otherwise human beings might eyeball this thing and say, this looks kind of fishy. The whole point of these certificates is as an ID card for servers, and if you have human beings that know that, they may be reluctant to interact with your server if you have any typos in there. So there's nothing functional in any of these fields about the street addresses, but it's just like a driver's license. If the DMV prints your driver's license address wrong, is that going to be functional for anything? No. You'll still get into all the bars of the world and so forth, but the things just might look funny if there's a really weird misspelling of your street address. So this is just like the street address on a driver's license. It's all intended to look very similar. This is the full list of names that are going to be placed onto the certificate if you don't add any extra ones. They want to have you indicate which of these domain names are going to be any SIP domain names. Remember the name cert.gkdemo.com. I have an external DNS entry pointing cert.gkdemo.com into my garage, and I want to add that name to my list of subject alternative names. You can add as many as you want. I want you guys to be able to go to https://cert.gkdemo.com just like http cert.gkdemo.com. So I need to add that to the list of names so that when you type that name into a web browser, it matches what's on the certificate, matching what's on the ID presented. So I do that, make the request. Just having supplied that much information, when I refresh my memory in the certificates tool, my wallet is now fuller. My wallet now has a certificate issued by the GKDemo CA to this Lync 2013 server. The other certificate that was there before was called a self-signed certificate. The issuer and the issuee being the same means that the machine called Lync 13 generated a certificate and gave it to itself. That's like me printing out an ID card that says Tommy certifies that I am Tommy. That's not good for checking IDs, but it does set up the encryption. So where people tell you all over the place that certificates are good for setting up encryption and they don't tell you about anything else, that really is all self-signed certificates are good for, is for setting up encryption. And it can do that, it just can't guarantee identity. This certificate can guarantee identity because it was issued by an actual CA. And if the issuer was VeriSign and GoDaddy and DigiCert, that would be like having a driver's license printed by a Department of Motor Vehicles you could use anywhere in the world. If it's a driver's license or an ID card printed by somebody in their basement, it is possible there could be a reputation where that driver's license, that ID card could be of use, but it's going to have limited use, that's for sure. And it will be useful within a domain, but getting machines that are not a member of a domain to interact with the servers that use these certificates is going to be problematic at best. You notice that the next thing after requesting the certificate is the assignment of the certificate, and when I do the certificate assignment wizard, that puts the little green checkbox next to the front-end services to say that certificate is going to be used whenever the front-end services are going to have to identify themselves to clients. This OAuth token issuer, this wasn't here on the 2010 servers. This is here only for 2013 Lync servers to interact with 2013 Exchange and SharePoint servers. So for the front-end server to use to identify itself to Exchange 13 and SharePoint 13 servers is the only thing that this certificate is going to be used for. If you don't have any Exchange 2013 and SharePoint 2013 servers, this certificate will not ever be used. It's still necessary to create, to throw into your wallet. So this next ID card now exists, this one right here that was just generated. This certificate has to be generated for you to make it through the wizard, but it's not actually going to be used for anything unless you have an Exchange 2013 and SharePoint 2013, one or the other or both, in your organization. It's just a newfangled thing that Microsoft decided to come up with for modern Exchange, SharePoint, and Lync servers to interact with each other. And that one OAuth token issuer certificate is going to be stored in the central management store, and all the Lync servers in the organization are going to acquire it when they get installed and use it to present to Exchange and SharePoint 2013 servers if they ever need to have any newfangled conversations like the archiving that you did in Module 8 or storing pictures in the Active Directory database and the Exchange database that are going to be shuffled around amongst the Exchange and Lync servers. There's a few types of conversations that Microsoft just came up with over the last couple of years that use the OAuth token issuer certificate to handle the security, but frankly they're not used by that much. And if you don't have an Exchange Server 2013 or SharePoint Server 2013 machine in your network, it's a totally worthless certificate. Even if you have Exchange 2010 that's doing your unified messaging storing voicemail for you, it does not, even the 2013 Exchange doesn't use the OAuth token issuer certificate for the voicemail configuration. It's just for the new types of conversation that Microsoft just came up with over the last couple of years. So it's really not that important a certificate, but it must be generated during the deployment process, otherwise you can't move past that point in the wizard. Speaking of the wizard, here's the same wizard on the Edge server. I installed my front-end server, and I am now ready to bring my Edge server to life. I need to do the same thing, request a certificate inside of the deployment wizard for the Edge server. This time it's not going to automatically connect to a CA based on a drop-down list box. It only does that when you are a member of a domain. So I had to manually type in this string. If you're wondering how did I know that string, just go to that same shared folder, was that // DC for domain controller. There's a shared folder called cert enroll that is offered from every domain controller, and there's a file that's offered, a CRT file. All you have to do is copy that string of text on the trusted root certificate file and then replace the backslash in the middle, put a backslash in the middle where the underscore is. Obviously file names are not allowed to have backslashes in them. That's why they put an underscore there instead. And that's the name of the CA. You can just fly through the rest of this. I can use the same username and password to log in for the certificate that I am logged into my Edge server here, so I don't need to worry about any other manipulation. This is just this friendly name is just a comment. Nothing's functional in it, but this is the certificate that the Edge server is going to use to identify itself to front-end servers. Front-end servers are going to push the changes to the topology out to the Edge servers. Any change you make to the topology will be noticed by the front-end servers, and the front-end servers are going to ship the information over to the edge server. You need to make sure that you name the edge server in the topology, and that you go into your DNS and you put the name of the edge servers into your DNS so that the internal servers know the IP addresses of the external servers. But when the front-end servers try to push the changes to the topology to these machines, they're not going to want to just push it to any old server in the world. They want to make sure they're really talking to the real Edge 2010, Edge 2013 servers. And so you need to make sure that there's a certificate, an ID card on the edge, so that the front-end servers can initiate a conversation. The edge can take a certificate out of the wallet. The wallet is empty right now. An ID card can be taken out of the wallet that has nothing in it at the moment and offer it as an ID card. And the same information in here. There's really nothing else that needs to be added to this request. This is a very simple little certificate that's only used for one thing. Whenever the internal servers, the front-end servers, want to push changes to the topology out to the edge, they want to make sure they really are talking to the edge. So I just requested a certificate from the certificate authority that the edge just acquired, and the edge server will now be able to identify itself to the front-end server when the front-end server tries to push changes to the CMS. Now, that's not going to help clients out there in the outside world connect to this Lync server, so I'll have to request one more certificate in the wizard. That's going to be the certificate that's issued that will be presented to the clients out there. So when I make a request in the bottom of these two fields, I'll be able to send the request immediately to my CA, specify that same certificate authority, specify all the same stuff. Oops, the friendly name should be different to identify itself to clients out there on the internet is what this certificate is good for on the edge server. So this edge server is going to have, you should check the box for which of the domain names are in use. Frankly, I've skipped that checkbox and things still worked. I don't know exactly why we need that checkbox there, but I certainly always check it. When the wizard finishes, we'll have another certificate in the memory of this machine, in the wallet, as I call it, of this machine. There's another ID card that exists. And when you finish all of these little wizards, it asks you to identify the certificate that is going to be used by all the edge services. And now that I've got the certificates in memory that are associated with the services, I'll be able to go and, right here, I'll be able to start up all the services. The deployment wizard has a little run button that usually shows up that allows you to start up all the services. All these services that start with the word Lync server are down right now. I can click the run button, and if the run button is offered to me, then I can click on it and say next. If the run button doesn't show up for some reason, I've been telling you all week long, just run start-cs Windows service and it will do the same thing for you. Once you run start-cs Windows service, refresh this little list, you see that all of the services are either finished coming to life or they're in the middle of coming to life right now. They soon will be finished. Back here on the front-end server, I have all these Lync servers services that just got installed, and I can go back to the deployment wizard and click the run button or open up the Lync server management shell and run the start-cs Windows service. That's all this tool is doing, is running start-cs Windows service. So that is looking at my list of services now. That's going to bring all these services to life. Once again, the user that I had signed into made a phone conversation that's still been running this whole time. 36 minutes into this demo, we still have this phone conversation that's been working. Phone and video conversation. I have a Lync 2010 environment that these two clients are connected to. The audio-video stream is going directly between the two clients, and I just introduced a 2013 Lync server environment. I prepared the Active Directory. I installed the services before this demo ever started. You saw me install the certificates into those Lync servers and then start up all the services. Now we have a healthy, good, working set of Lync servers. We can talk about continuing the upgrade process, but before I do that, are there any questions any of you have about certificates? Throughout the coming years and months, I hope that you have the same kind of experience that I had after I first learned about this certificate ID analogy. I could not believe how many times there were analogies that I used because I was confused about something I was doing with certificates a month or a year after that little class I took, and I thought to myself, okay, I don't understand what I'm doing. Let me think, if this were a driver's license, not a certificate, what would the correlative concept be? And I couldn't believe how clear everything with certificates suddenly became. One of the most challenging things about certificates has to do with something called a certificate revocation list. Before we do the upgrades, I do want to talk about the CRL for a moment, because if you have trouble standing up your own certificate authority and getting clients to connect, it's probably going to be because of the CRL. And I want to talk about what a certificate revocation list is for a moment before we then move on and actually talk about the upgrades. So if you have a question on anything we've seen so far, fire away. But if not, let's talk about something called a certificate revocation list. If you watch my YouTube videos, oh great, Gary, I'm glad it's coming in handy. So if you're comfortable with the idea that a driver's license is to a person what a certificate is to a computer, and see if you can follow a little bit more down that rabbit hole, there is something called the Certificate Authority tool, which is available on any server that you've installed the Active Directory certificate services on. And so when I look at the properties of my certificate authority in this little thing called extensions, there is a little reference here to the CRL. You see this checkbox here, include in CRLs. What's a CRL? Certificate revocation list, CRL, is where VeriSign and GoDaddy and DigiCert have the opportunity to put a master list of revoked certificates out there. Why would there be a revoked certificate? Well, remember that the whole point of a certificate is for somebody to identify themselves. The people that work for Citibank had to go to VeriSign and say, I'd like a certificate, please. They had to pay for it, but also they had to prove who they are. You can't just go to VeriSign and say, please give me a certificate that ends in Citibank.com. VeriSign is not going to give that to you because the whole point of these is to guarantee identity. VeriSign and DigiCert and GoDaddy are required, if they want to stay on the blessed list, they're required to be good at checking IDs. And so if they botch things and an ID is found to be given out, a certificate is found to be given out to a company that didn't really request it, it's some poser got a certificate, then the organization, VeriSign, DigiCert, whatever, can place that certificate, the thumbprint for that certificate, into something called a certificate revocation list. By the way, every certificate has something called a thumbprint, a unique identifier that if you tamper with a certificate, it's basically a checksum that won't work out anymore. And those thumbprints can be published to a certificate revocation list to indicate that that certificate should not have been issued and that any browser, any bouncer that runs across it, you shouldn't actually accept it as a valid form of ID. This little CRL distribution points, you see that there is this location that is available, that VeriSign publishes their CRL apparently. If I press Control-C and say OK, you know, I've never actually done this for VeriSign, but if I go to that location, it will download a file for me. That file had better be accessible. And when I open that file, here it is. This is the VeriSign revocation list. How many certificates has VeriSign had to revoke? Looks like these. Don't know if I can make this any bigger. But basically, VeriSign issued all these certificates and then regretted it and posts all of them on this location so that any web browser that cares to look at it is going to be able to, whenever a user goes to eBay or Amazon or whatever, whenever a certificate is offered, the certificate revocation list path can be followed to acquire this list, and the thumbprint on the certificate for the Amazon server, the eBay server, whatever, is compared to this list to see if it's a certificate that's been revoked. In that case, it shouldn't be trusted any more than if it had expired or any more than if no trusted authority had issued it or if the name didn't match. Those are basically the 4 checks that a browser goes through when somebody sits at a web browser, types in ebay.com, and then this HTTPS resource is accessed. Excuse me. The 4 checks that happen are, did the certificate that's being presented come from a trusted authority? Is the driver's license coming from the state of Virginia or from Bubba's basement? Is the name on the certificate going to match exactly the name that's in the URL that the user typed in or got redirected to? And if not, is the subject alternative name at least mentioning that name up there? That's another check. Also, has the certificate not expired, or is it outside of the validity period, the 3 years that the certificate is good for? But also, web browsers can be configured to either care about or not care about the CRL. Anybody at a corporate machine like your own almost certainly has strong security policies where the certificate revocation list is going to be adhered to pretty tightly. You won't be able to navigate seamlessly to a machine that has a certificate that's on this list. But also there's the question of what happens if the certificate revocation list is not available? What happens if this sb.symcb.com/sbcrl, what if that file is not available? What does a web browser do if eBay gives a certificate to it that says, this is my name, this is VeriSign that proves that I am who I say I am, this is where the certificate revocation list is available? If that location is not accessible by the browser, what does the browser do? You have browser settings that you can specify for. Should it ignore those problems? Should it warn the user about those problems? Should it just give you error messages? And you can set up through group policy what a web browser is going to do. Guess what? With a Lync client, you can't set up, what it's going to do, it just fails. If the certificate revocation list for a user, when a user is using the Lync client and the Lync client connects to a Lync server, hands out its hand and says, give me your ID, the Lync client is the bouncer asking the bar patron, the web server, the Lync server, for ID. When the Lync server reaches into its wallet, hands out the ID, the certificate, to the awaiting Lync client, the Lync client is going to look at the certificate, and here is for anybody who contacts that Lync 10 machine. This is the certificate that it's offering, and there is a reference to a certificate revocation list in here, and notice that there's an LDAP location. Well, that's really helpful for anybody that's in the domain. That ain't helpful at all for anybody in the outside world, so I added in my certificate revocation list one entry in here, which is a second place that the same CRL can be found. Anytime you're in a domain, the certificate authority by default is going to offer the CRL to all of the domain joined machines through this big long LDAP path. And that's going to work just fine for internal Lync clients to be able to check the CRL to see if the certificate being presented is on it. But the path that I added manually is the tough one to make work. And if you watch my YouTube videos, you'll see how I made this little HTTP reference come to life and match exactly the information that you can find on the page that I've brought you through a couple times, the cert.gknema.com/cert location. These CRL files I made available online. Actually, the whole reason why I made this cert virtual directory was really just to have these CRL files responding online so that if anybody ever is connecting with a Lync client to my Lync server offers an ID card to say, hey, this is who I am. The GK Demo CA proves that I am who I say I am, so here. And the problem is that the Lync client is configured to be a bouncer that takes his job really seriously. The analogy in the real world would be if I go down here in Austin to 6th Street where the bars are, if I go down on a Friday night to try to get into a bar, picture the bouncer at the bar holding out his hand when I first walk up. That's like a web browser saying to a web server, give me your ID card, give me your certificate. I reach into my wallet, the web server reaches into memory, grabs the ID, hands it over to the bouncer, the web browser, whatever. Picture a bouncer looking at the ID card. At the front of it is my name, my picture, kind of like a thumbprint of a certificate, looks at the expiration date. If the driver's license is expired, he's not going to let me in. Some bouncers actually do that. I've heard of that before. Some bouncers are just looking for a reason not to let somebody in, and so let's say this driver's license is expired, go away. They have the right to do that. They have the right to do anything they want to check the validity of that driver's license. Picture a bouncer who is so serious at their job that they look at the ID card, check the name on the ID, say, what's your name? I say Thomas Christensen. He says, okay, that jives. This thing is not expired. It comes from the state of Texas, so everything is looking good so far. But if he flips the driver's license to the back, let's say that there was an address, a street address, in downtown Austin, the capital of Texas. There's a street address where the Department of Motor Vehicles for the state of Texas lists everybody who's had a DUI and therefore had the driver's license revoked. Picture the bouncer at the bar after looking at the driver's license, looking at me funny and saying, I'm not so sure about you. Picture him getting out of his stool, walking down the street 3 blocks to where the street address on the driver's license tells him there is a list of everybody who's had their driver's license revoked. And if he finds my ID on that list, then it's not a valid driver's license, even though I'm carrying it around, and he can confiscate it. He can just tell me to get lost. If he doesn't find my driver's license on that list, then he knows that it's a valid driver's license, and he has to let me in. That's what a CRL is. It's like a piece of paper on the courthouse steps that has a list of everybody whose driver's license have been revoked that bouncers at bars are welcome to walk over and look at, and on the driver's license itself is printed the address where that can be found. On a certificate is always printed the address where the certificate revocation list can be found, very much like printing onto a driver's license where somebody can walk over to the outside of the courthouse steps and find the list of revoked driver's licenses. And it's amazing how many tough concepts there are in certificates that the more you lift the hood and start thinking about them the way you would driver's licenses, things can start to make sense. At least they do for me. Now I've been using that analogy for myself for years, and so whenever I see something new, I instantly go to that analogy. It took me a while after I heard the original analogy to realize how powerful it was. So I just want to encourage you to think of driver's licenses for people as you would certificates for machines. Think of this place in the tool called the certificates tool as the wallet that your machine carries around to be able to reach up and grab any one of these licenses, to be able to offer any one of these ID cards, to be able to offer depending on what situation is arising. I just wanted to mention that one thing about the certificate revocation list. You will have to go to your certificate authority if you make your own CA, and make sure that whatever the certificate revocation list is emblazoned here is actually going to respond online. The LDAP location is not good enough because your aunts and uncles and cousins, if you want them to be able to interact with your Lync server to test it on out, they're not going to have access to that. And even if you give them the trusted root certificate to have them think of your printing press as they would VeriSign and GoDaddy and DigiCert, that's not going to help the Lync client to contact the certificate revocation list. And the Lync client is pre-configured to be very diligent with its job as a bouncer. You can't go in like you can a web browser and change the security settings so that you can blow past certificate warnings. The Lync client and the Outlook client are both renowned for being really good at their jobs of being bouncers. They really don't want to deal with a server that doesn't have a perfect certificate situation. And that's going to be the biggest problem probably as you go to do configuration of your Lync servers, is if you stand up Lync servers on your own, try to do it for free, and don't buy your certificates from VeriSign or GoDaddy, but instead you try to make them just spring to life from your own CA. The certificate revocation list is the hardest thing to configure, I would imagine. And you can always punt and just go ahead and buy a certificate from VeriSign and GoDaddy, and then it's up to them to make sure that the certificate revocation list is available. It's whoever prints the driver's license that has to put on the back of the driver's license the street address where the revoked driver's license can be found. And unfortunately, if you print a bunch of these certificates from the CA and then decide that you don't like the settings because you didn't make a publicly available HTTP resource in here, all of the certificates that you issued need to be thrown away, and then new certificates need to be created that have the changes. You can't retroactively change a single character of a certificate, and so if you want to make a change to this information that's printed onto the certificate, you'll have to blow away that certificate and create a brand new one. Certificates cannot be changed after they've been issued, including the location where the certificate revocation list can be found. So that's most of the little ins and outs that I like to impart to you that have helped me through the years to keep my sanity as I deal with certificate administration. You see that while I've been yapping here, I've been able to get all this services to start on my Lync 2013 server. My client is still connected to the Lync 2010 server, and my audio-video stream is still going directly from one laptop to another laptop. So it's time to start talking about doing an upgrade. Now that I've got two healthy Lync 2013 servers, the front-end server and the Edge server. I got the Edge 13 here. I got the Lync 2013 here. What I should be doing now is coming up with a pilot set of users to modify their Lync client settings. I don't have a Lync client that's not signed in right now. I don't want to sign out. It will kill this audio conversation. But basically, if I check my options and if I came in when I was not actually signed in, I'd be able to take a look at the machine that I'm connecting to, whether I'm using DNS to automatically connect to a Lync server or whether I want to point myself directly to a specific Lync server. You get that in the tools options when you're signed out. The bootstrap provisioning lets you choose which server to connect to. Right now, I'm signed in, and so it's showing me the in-band provisioning settings. I can change all this stuff from the Lync server by pushing down all the settings to me, but the bootstrap provisioning settings are the ones that you get before you've ever even signed in, and that's what I'd have to modify if I wanted pilot users to be able to interact with this server to test the waters and see if everything's okay. I'm not really worried if I break everything in this little demo, so let's be cavalier and not have any pilot users. Let's just move all of us at once. Right now, we're all homed on the 2010 server, and what I want to do is eventually rehome us on the 2013 server, but unfortunately, you can't come in through the 2010 Edge and be directed to the 2013 front-end server, but you can do the opposite. While I'm still homed on the 2010 server, and you guys are as well, I can set everything up so that you come in through the 2013 Edge and get authenticated by the 2013 front-end server, have that server find out it's the wrong server to authenticate you, and redirect the SIP stream to the older server. I need to set things up so that the firewall and the certificates and the DNS and the reverse proxy are getting all of your traffic and my traffic and Mancha's traffic to go through the 2013 servers and be redirected while we're still homed on the old 2010 servers.
Until,
so
of course,
I think about
45
moving
highway miles per gallon comes
I
along.
need to change the firewall settings, any DNS, any reverse proxy, any certificate issues need to be dealt with all together to figure out what the master plan is going to be, and then I need to make the change all at once. And if I can make the change so that I have the, trying to click here, I didn't see my own name there. It's because I didn't do another find. My own user account here that is on the Lync 2010 server. If I leave that user homed on the 2010 server and redirect all the flow of traffic so that it goes through the 2013 edge and front end, bounces off of the 2013 front end and makes its way back to the Lync 2010 front end, if I can do all that firewall administration and not lose connectivity, then I'm home free. I'll be able to move the users, rehome them on the 2013 server just fine. But you can't put the cart before the horse. You can't move the users first while they're still going through the old Edge server. You need to make sure to set up all the DNS and the reverse proxies and everything else to make the old users connect to the new servers while they're still the old users, while they're still going homed on the older servers. So you see here my internal DNS. This actually doesn't affect any of you guys, but I can change all my alias records here that are pointing to the Lync 2010 server. I can change them to the 2013. This is part of the process that will allow you to do an upgrade, is to change all your DNS records so that everything that was pointing to the old servers is going to be pointing to the new. Internal users would be affected by what I'm doing right now, and I'd want to test if I make this change to make sure that the internal users are not affected, are not adversely affected. But hopefully you can do this and everything will still work just fine. The users on the internal network will be redirected to the older servers. Basically, the users on the internal network, when they do an _sip._tls.gkdemo.com request, they try to log in as somebody at gkdemo.com. Their Lync client is configured to put the characters _sip._tls dot in front of whatever domain name the user is logging in as. They get the instructions to say go to port 5061 of the machine named sip.gkdemo.com. Well, what's sip.gkdemo.com? Until a minute ago, it was the Lync 2010 server, but now it's a 2013 server. So if I have any internal users, they're going to have the Lync client, when they try to log in as Mancha or Jessica or whoever, they're going to have the packets go to the 2013 server. The 2013 server is going to try to authenticate that user, find from Active Directory that it's a user homed on the old server still. I still haven't moved the user. Every user is still a 2010 user. And so the Lync client will be redirected to the Lync 2010 server that the user is actually homed on. So DNS, back here, is one of the things you change in order to get the traffic directed to the 2013 server instead of the 2010 server. I just made that change. Also, the Edge server needs to, the 2010 Edge server needs to step out of the way. The new 2013 Edge server needs to come into the fun. So you see here I'm taking the 442, 444, and 5061 ports. That's what my topology builder has declared that my Edge servers should listen on. Both my 2010 and 2013 Edge servers are configured to listen on port 5061, 442, and 444. In the Chapter 6 yesterday, let me make another version of this demo file. In Chapter 6 yesterday, they talked about how they recommend for 3 IP addresses to all listen on port number 443. I have a single IP address listening on these 3 ports, 5061, 444, and 442, emblazoned right here in the 2010 Edge server configuration, and the 2013 Edge server configuration is expecting to listen to the same port numbers but a different IP address. The 101 IP address instead of the 100 IP address with the same port numbers is what the Edge 2013 server is expecting to listen on, whereas the 100 IP address is what the Edge 2010 server is expecting to listen on. My firewall has been forwarding all 4 of those ports, the 5061, 444, and 442, has been forwarding those 3 ports plus the 3478. Told you about this port number yesterday. Take the numbers 1 through 8, discard the first 2 numbers, keep the next 2, discard the next 2, keep the next 2. You have the 1 port that you have no control over. The other 3 ports you can type into Topology Builder what you want to utilize. Right now all that's being forwarded to my .100 machine. I want to get rid of the rules that are sending the traffic to the .100 machine and instead send them to the 101. Now I'm making these changes, the changes that I just made to my internal DNS and the changes that I'm now making to my firewall, I'm making them over the span of a few minutes. What you want to do is have a change management procedure in place where you're going to be able to stage the changes that you want and then run a script that's going to make all those changes immediately, perhaps at midnight on a Saturday night when all of your IT staff is ready for the change to happen and you have all your pilot users ready to test everything and make sure it's really going to work properly. So I'm doing things over the span of a few minutes here that would, in the real world, it would be a whole lot better off if you could do it with one script running. And I'm just taking the 4 IP address port combinations that were declared in the topology builder, and I am making sure that instead of going to the 100 machine, they're going to the 101 machine. I've got 3 of the 4 that have been configured so far. I've got 1 left. That port 5061 is the last of the ones remaining that needs to go to the 101 machine. So all 4 of these ports were going to the .100 machine a while ago, and now they're going to the 101 machine. So I made some changes to my internal DNS. I made some changes to my external firewall. By the way, the port 443 is going to the .99 IP address. That .99 IP address is my reverse proxy. The reverse proxy I've got set up to do some really strange stuff. If you come back and look at the YouTube videos that I created, you'll see that I took my reverse proxy and I set up it. TMG is what I'm using, but Squid and IIS and any one of a number of reverse proxies could work for you. I've got my reverse proxy set up so that there's a couple of firewall rules that are allowing HTTPS traffic. Anything that is headed towards the name of Autodiscover or webmail is headed towards the internal firewall in my organization over port 443. The .2 machine is my internal firewall. It's my NAT server. And I've got the port 443 coming right through my reverse proxy onto that port if somebody's trying to access either Autodiscover or webmail, some names that my Exchange server goes by. But if any other name comes in, the second most important of the rules that I've got, only if a resource other than Autodiscover and webmail is asked for will this second rule kick in. If somebody comes in for any resource other than Autodiscover and webmail, then I'm going to be sending the traffic to the same .2 machine, but I'm going to be sending it over port 4443. My internal firewall is going to be able to differentiate the traffic that is hitting the Exchange server versus the traffic that's supposed to hit the Lync server, because all the stuff that hits the internal firewall, here's my internal firewall, the port 443 stuff, it just forwards on to port 40, which is my Exchange server, and the port 4443 is headed towards the .20 machine, which is my Lync 2010 server. I need to change that to go to the .30 machine, which is the 2013 server, and that changed the last of the protocols that I needed to modify. I know I went through a whole lot of that stuff really quickly. For anybody who's never done the kind of firewall administration that I just did, I wouldn't expect that much of it was very intuitive, but it's all being recorded, and if you ever have trouble doing an upgrade either in your own basement trying to make one happen or whatever you decide to do with an upgrade down the road, if you have trouble with it and it's just not working, you have this recording for the next 6 months, and hopefully it will pay you some dividends. You saw what I just did was I took all the inbound traffic from internal machines using my internal DNS and all the inbound traffic from external machines using my external firewall settings and my internal firewall settings. The reverse proxy I didn't even make any changes on. I just went ahead and used the internal and external firewall settings to redirect the traffic. I've got things set up, should probably show you this, that the 2013 Lync server is in IIS, responding to 2 web pages. I didn't choose that port number 4443 arbitrarily. The internal and external websites are listening to port 80 and 4443 for the external website, 80 and 443 for the internal website. Topology Builder allows you to specify what port numbers you want, but those are the default. The internal and external websites want to respond to different sets of users, and you have control over the port 80, 80, 80, 4443. You can control all that stuff if you don't like what Microsoft has created, but that's the default, is that users coming from the outside world need to make a request over port 443, and at some point in your DMZ, it needs to be translated to port 4443 so that it can hit the appropriate external website. The content of the external website is different from the content of the internal website, and your server knows which client is making which request by whether the packets hit the internal server over port 443 or they hit it over port 4443. And you need to make sure in your DMZ to take all the traffic headed for port 443 and have the traffic be redirected to port 4443 if you want the default settings to work. It's also possible to just change the default settings in Topology Builder as a property of the server every front-end server has its own idea of what port numbers it's going to listen on. And that's where the 4443 comes from, that the servers are going to be listening on there. You see that my conversations have worked perfectly this entire time. I have not been disconnected just because I've been redirecting my firewall traffic and my DNS, and also I had to generate certificates that match the DNS names that I was going to use. And my reverse proxy, I didn't actually make any changes to mine, but in the real world, you might have changes that you have to process on the reverse proxy as well. So the certificates in the reverse proxy and the DNS and the firewalls, you need to have a good plan of attack for what you're going to do with each of them before you ever think about upgrading a user. And when you want to upgrade a user, here's how it works. Don't blink. When I come to Lync 2013 server and run the Lync server control panel and sign in, I'm going to be able to see all the users. This time I have 2 CSCP virtual directories that are being painted by my IIS services on the front-end server here. I can take a look at all the users, and here they are. And I can take all these users that are currently registering with the 2010 server, scroll on down, highlight with the shift button every single one of them, go to the action menu, and say move selected users to pool, choose the Lync 2013 server. It's not actually a pool. I wish they wouldn't use that term. I wish they would say registrar. They could just leave off the word pool, and that would be fine. But the destination pool is, the source was the 2010 server. The destination is the 2013 server. If the 2010 server was down, I could check this box saying force, but I don't need to do that because there's going to be a clean transition here. This is what it looks like to upgrade a user. Watch when I click on OK, and then come quickly to my Lync client. When I'm upgraded, the user should see something flash if they watch quickly enough. There we go. You saw that the Lync client flashed, and I'm hoping that I set up my routing properly so that it should sign back in. The Mancha client I see did sign back in right away. You can take my word for it at the other end of the room. The re-sign in did happen. I've got some strange routing going on in my, and it's saying that the server is causing limited functionality. I thought that I had set everything up to allow for this demo to work, but apparently I did botch something. I've got static routes going on. I use the route add command on this laptop that I'm looking at right here. I've got the route add command doing some magic to allow me to connect without doing hairpinning, and I clearly botched something. So if I try to cancel that, it's going to kill the audio session. The audio-video session that I had going on just got killed as well. So I botched the very end of that little demonstration. There's not really that much going on that you missed out on. The whole reason why the demo didn't work at the end there was simply because my AT&T firewall doesn't allow hairpinning, and my laptop is actually on technically my DMZ. The network that my laptop is on is in the demilitarized zone that the Lync servers are using my wireless network as a DMZ is the best way to put it. And the wireless network, the network that's people wandering into my house borrowing the wireless, that network is where my laptop is, and that network is technically used as the DMZ for my servers, and my external firewall doesn't allow hairpinning, so it's not very likely I'm going to get that kind of situation in the real world. And I thought I had configured all my IP addresses to watch that, but you saw that the conversation between me and Mancha persisted, and Mancha's machine was configured properly. It signed back in, but the laptop where I'm sitting apparently just had some sort of problem with its routing. It's no longer able to connect to the internal network. But I still am connected, by the way, to the Wi-Fi connection. I've got a laptop that's connected through my Verizon hotspot, and it flashed for just a moment and signed back in. Any of you who are signed in right now, I'm expecting that you would have seen the login flash and then sign back in. You are now homed on the 2013 server, so the upgrade just happened. And